I started this painting just by drawing the bird really lightly in pencil and erasing it back so I get rid of most of the pencil marks. And then I'm just painting in the big areas with a pretty watery mixture of gouache. First, I get down the yellow. This is a Western meadowlark we're painting, so it's really important that the yellow be very clean and bright. And then I'm just working with some neutrals on the wing pattern, and actually trying to blend those a little bit with a wet brush. So one of the cool things about gouache is that you can either let it dry a bit and you get really crisp definition, and that's going to be important when we get into like the pattern on the bird's wing. But also, if you work at it when it's wet, then you can get colors that'll transition into one another very seamlessly and very beautifully. And I'm going to do a little bit of each here. This is a very sped up version. I filmed this in real time, so I send these out to subscribers. They just come to your inbox once a week. So if you're interested, just check out the box below and I'll put a link and you can just go click through and take a look and just see what it's about. So I always want to make sure that that one layer is dry before I work on the next, if I do in fact want that very crisp kind of definition. And also, I'm mostly just doing this with one brush. So this is a flat brush, and I actually like using that edge to get details. It's a nice way to work, and it goes quickly if you just have one brush in your hand the whole time. For black here, I'm using Payne's Gray, and I mix just a little bit of brown in with it. The kind of palette that I use is basically just a dinner plate. You know, I just pick these up at the thrift store. And if there's dried gouache left on it, I will wash off the kind of big puddles of color that might be dried, but I just leave the little bits that are kind of stuck to the plate because it just gives me little tiny traces of other colors that I can just use to mix with, which is very nice. Now, one thing that I want to really emphasize is the shadow pattern, because I want this bird to feel very round. You know, you really want to get the sense of it as like a three-dimensional thing, even though you're only painting in 2 dimensions. So I'm getting some shadow in, make sure that's pretty dark. And then I'm also going to start using kind of some darker grays, some neutral colors, to start working on the patterns in the wing. I'm not necessarily trying to paint every feather, right? Like that's not what this is about. But since there are a lot of patterns on the wing, I obviously need to get the sense of those patterns because that's what makes a meadowlark a meadowlark. And here again too, there's sort of a darker side and a lighter side. So over to the left, you know, on the sort of the top of the wing, it's a little bit darker, and so you get that sense of shadow because it's so round. So now I'm coming in and just dropping in a little bit more of the patterns that I see. You can work from your own photos with a painting like this, or, you know, use photos from a field guide, photos that you find online. You know, it's best to have like a bunch of different references and you're sort of compiling your own painting, your own design based on those references. So now I've gone down to a smaller brush because now I really do need to get these fine details. So this might be like a number 4 round. I really like these Princeton Velvet Touch brushes. They're synthetic brushes. They last a long time. They're pretty good quality and they're quite affordable. So I'm just very carefully getting in these little details. I always save things like the eye and some of the details on the beak. I tend to save those for closer to the end because I like to just sort of warm up on other parts of the bird. So, you know, I'll do things like the tail first before I really work too much on the face because, you know, we tend to look at faces, whether it's a human or an animal, we tend to really focus on faces. So you sort of want to get that right. So now I'm just dropping in all these little markings, little patterns I see, and I'm going from, you know, I started with a light color, and then every pass I make is increasingly dark. But of course, this is gouache, so you can also layer a lighter color on top of a darker color. You just want to make sure that it's really, really dry when you do that. And the light color that you put on top needs to be a pretty thick, rich mixture, not too watery. Because if it's too watery, it's going to reactivate all the layers underneath, and you're just not going to get that separation of color that you might be looking for. But this is coming together pretty well. I really like the way it looks. So now I'm in with a tiny, tiny brush, a little spotter, and I'm just trying to get a few little details in white, like a little gleam in the bird's eye. And now I'm going to just refine some of the details in the beak. These kind of last little touches can really make a difference. And painters like to call this the bling layer, when you really go through and you look for, okay, what are those little details? Often they're very dark or very light brush strokes, just those last few touches that really make it stand out. So I'm just looking for those, and this is a good thing to really kind of slow down and take your time, take a break, look away, maybe even take a picture of the painting with your phone and then just look at it on your phone. The idea is to just get a little bit of a different perspective on it. And usually you can see immediately what it is that you still need to be doing. So I'm just kind of darkening up. I tend to not worry about a ton of detail in the legs because I know that the focus is really going to be on the bird's body and its face. So the legs are just kind of like, I just need to get something down there that looks, that looks close enough, that looks pretty right. Now I'm going to come back with a bigger brush and just mix up kind of a brown from the other colors I have to just give this bird something that it's standing on. So I'm just going to paint with a pretty watery mixture. I'm going to paint like a fence post or a log or something that it's standing on. I won't put a ton of detail into this. It just needs to, you need some sense of like where it is in its environment a little bit. So this is pretty much done. I've got out some colored pencils, and I'm just using a little bit of white colored pencil for a few highlights on the beak. Sometimes with a super sharp colored pencil, you can really just nail a tiny little detail like that. And with gouache, you really can't tell the difference. So I'm using Prismacolor Premier pencils, which are pretty creamy, and you can really get a texture that looks a lot like gouache. So if you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe, and also check out below if you want to see about my newsletter, where I have the full-length version of this. We do it in real time, and every week we do something that's, basically if you can do it in a sketchbook, we will eventually get around to it. So go check that out if you're interested, and thanks very much.